Feeling great and soaking in some majestic early autumn views today here at the tippy top of the always rewarding Table Rock, located in upstate South Carolina. What's up, guys? Dave here again. Hope you're doing safe and well out there. Today I want to lay out 10 honest and humbling backpacking mistakes I've made as a beginning backpacker. Some experienced through blissful ignorance, and other blunders I've made through haste, sheer hubris, or simple lack of preparation. If you'd love to explore content covering backpacking, hiking, and camping, and would like to be notified of future content, please consider tapping that subscribe button. Also, be sure to stick around throughout the duration of this video to snag a tasty 10% off site-wide coupon code to score gear, apparel, and merch over at hilltoppacks.com. Without further ado, let's hit the list. Staying hydrated is one of the most important parts of any hike, no matter the environment. But when the temperature climbs, it becomes even more critical and sometimes way more challenging. Finding reliable water at higher elevations isn't always guaranteed, and I've learned that the hard way on more occasions than I'd like to admit. There have been plenty of times when I passed the last chance stream thinking, I'll fill up at the next one. Then a few miles and a few hundred feet of elevation later, I find out there is no next one. Just dry creek beds and regret. The truth is, gravity and physics run the show out here. The higher you climb, the scarcer the water usually gets. And when you mix in drought conditions or weeks without rain, even the most dependable sources can dry up fast. And sure, water's heavy, about 2 pounds per liter, and it's always tempting to skip that extra refill to keep your pack lighter. But now, if I know I'm about to start climbing, I'll gladly carry the extra weight. Because nothing beats taking that long, cold urn drink at the summit, knowing you planned ahead. My titanium cooking pot is a powerhouse of lightweight, heat-dissipating, quick-boiling metal magic. Recently, during a few outings, I fell into an honest and somewhat annoying oversight. Despite wiping the pot after each use, it seemed I hadn't quite dried the inside entirely before placing my isobutane canister back inside for storage. With the steel ring underside of the fuel canister resting in a light bit of residual water, I began to notice after a while that a bit of rust had started to form. On top of better drying, I may opt to store my canister capped and upside down, or store atop my canister stand going forward. When you're shopping for your first multi-day backpack, it can be really tempting to go big. After all, a larger pack should mean a more organized trip, right? More space, more gear, more comfort. That's what I thought too. A few years back, I found my first backpack on eBay, a big one. I figured, hey, at least I'll know everything I own will fit. So I loaded it up at home for a test run. And sure enough, even after packing all my gear, I still had room left. That's when the trouble started, because all that empty space was begging to be filled. Before I knew it, I'd added extra clothes, redundant gear, and a few fear-driven, just-in-case items that, honestly, had no real purpose on my trip. By the time I was done, my pack tipped over 30 pounds, above the commonly recommended 20% of your body weight guideline for comfort. But weight wasn't my only mistake. I'd packed gear in no particular order, so my load was totally unbalanced. Fast forward to my first long-distance hike. 2 miles in on what was supposed to be a 10-mile day, and I was already wrecked. My shoulders ached, my knees hurt, and I was literally dumping out water and food just to get any relief I possibly could. And when I got home, sore, exhausted, and a little humbled, I realized something important. Backpacking isn't about bringing everything you might need. It's about bringing what you actually need. Since then, I made it a goal to keep my base weight, that's everything except food, fuel, and water, under a comfortable limit for me. I started focusing on multi-purpose gear, cutting out items that only served one job, and ditching anything I was carrying out of fear. Even now, I'm still fine-tuning my essentials. Each trip, I look for ways to lighten the load a little more, to pack smarter, and to focus on what really matters, enjoying the hike, not just surviving it. If there's one part of your body you can't afford to neglect on a backpacking trip, it's your feet. They're your foundation, your shock absorbers, your transportation. And believe me, when they start to fail, the whole trip goes downhill fast. I learned that lesson the hard way. Before I got serious about backpacking, I didn't think much about foot strength. At home, I was always in shoes. Hard floors, stiff soles, zero time barefoot. So when I hit the trail with a loaded pack, my feet and ankles just weren't ready for the uneven terrain. Every rock, every root, every tilt in the ground forced muscles I hadn't really exercised to suddenly do their job. Now I make an effort to spend more time barefoot, around the house or anywhere I can safely. It helps strengthen those small stabilizing muscles that help keep your feet and ankles resilient on the trail. Think of it as pre-season training for your feet. Then there's the sock mistake, and I've made it more than once. I used to wear thick cotton socks, thinking more padding meant more comfort. In reality, it meant trapped moisture, sweaty feet, and tons of friction. The result? Hot spots. Those painful warning signs that a blister is coming. Cotton holds moisture like a sponge, and once your socks are damp, every step rubs that moisture and grit right into your skin. Now I stick with synthetic or merino wool socks. They wick moisture, breathe better, and dry quickly. It's one of the simplest upgrades that makes a massive difference. And speaking of hot spots, I used to feel that faint burn on my heel or toes and think, I'll deal with it later. Huge mistake. By the time I'd stop, those little hot spots would be formed into full-blown blisters, and suddenly every step was like walking on hot pavement. Now the second I feel that heat or friction, I stop. Shoes off, socks off, dry my feet. Then I apply moleskin or blister tape to protect the area before it gets worse. It takes maybe 5 minutes, but it can save an entire trip. You can have the best boots, the lightest gear, and the strongest legs in the world, but if your feet give out, your adventure ends early. Spend time strengthening them before you ever hit the trail. Wear the right socks, and never ignore what your feet are trying to tell you. When most people set up camp, they focus on what's around them. Flat ground, distance from water, maybe a nice view. But there's one thing that a lot of campers forget to check, and it can literally kill you. They're called Widowmakers, and if you camp long enough, you'll eventually spot one. A widowmaker is a dead or dying branch that's hanging precariously in a tree, or sometimes a whole tree that's decayed or storm damaged to a point where it could fall at any moment. All it takes is a gust of wind, a steady rain, or sometimes no reason at all, and it comes crashing down. And when you got your tent or campfire underneath, that's a recipe for disaster. These things don't give warnings, they just fall. Whenever you're picking a campsite, whether it's for a tent or hammock, don't just look at the ground. Take a second to look up and all around, and ask yourself, are there any dead limbs above me? Does that tree look healthy? If a branch or tree looks questionable, it probably is. A little spatial awareness can be the difference between a peaceful night and a dangerous one. Here's the part most people miss. You can't always spot widowmakers from one angle. Before setting up, take a few steps back and check your sight from multiple directions. If it's dusk or dark, don't rely on your eyes adjusting. Grab your flashlight or headlamp and scan the canopy above. A quick light check could reveal a cracked limb or hanging debris you'd never see otherwise. Widowmakers are one of those outdoor hazards that don't seem real until you see one come down, and by then, it's too late. So make it part of your setup routine. Look up, look around, and trust your instincts. If you spend enough time hiking, you know that wet surfaces can turn from harmless to hazardous in an instant. Rocks, roots, bridges, things that look solid and safe can suddenly become as slick as ice, and trust me, I've learned that lesson the hard way. Several years ago, my wife and I were hiking Looking Glass Rock, a majestic granite dome, not too unlike Table Rock here actually. It had rained the night before, but by morning, the skies had cleared, and we figured the trail would be fine. When we reached the summit, I took a few steps out onto the open rock and immediately felt my boots slide out from under me. For a split second, gravity reminded me who's in charge as I abruptly landed on my back. That thin layer of algae and moisture on the stone turned it into a natural slip and slide, and I was maybe a few harrowing feet away from a serious fall. That moment further burned a lesson deep into my brain. Never underestimate slick alginated rock. And slippery hazards aren't just found on summits. Algae-coated wooded crossings, like bridges or trail planks, can be just as treacherous. That greenish tint you see on the wood, that's nature's way of saying, step here and you might regret it. And then there are wet leaves on bridges or boardwalks. They might look harmless, but they're basically banana peels. One misplaced step and you're suddenly on your back, staring at the forest canopy. Now I approach any wet surface with respect and awareness. I test my footing, I slow down, and if it's a wooden crossing coated in algae or leaves, I take it one careful step at a time. It might take a few extra seconds, but it beats the alternative of getting hurt miles from the trailhead. Hiking isn't about how fast you move, it's about how long you can keep doing it. If you've ever invested in a down sleeping bag or quilt, you know they're not cheap. Lightweight, ultra warm, packs down tiny, it's one of the best pieces of gear a backpacker can own. But there's one simple mistake that can quietly destroy all that performance, and I've made it more than once. After a few trips, I got lazy, or maybe a bit forgetful. I'd come home, toss my still compressed sleeping bag into the closet, and just leave it there, sometimes for weeks on end. What I didn't realize was that was slowly crushing the bag's insulation, the delicate down clusters that trap and retain heat. When down stays compressed too long, those fluffy clusters start to clump together, losing their loft, and with it, their ability to keep you warm. The next time I hit the trail, I noticed my bag just didn't feel the same. It took longer to warm up, and it never quite fluffed back to life. Now I keep my sleeping bag in a large sack and hang it loosely from a closet. This gives the down space to fully loft and air out between trips. It's a simple switch that helps preserve warmth, shape, and longevity. It might take up a little more room at home, but the payout is huge. My bag stays lofty, warm, and ready for the next adventure. I used to think that shortcuts meant efficiency. Fewer steps, less effort, quicker to camp. But in reality, they often equate to steeper climbs, thicker brush, and way more sweat. Looking back, there was one hike where I decided to get adventurous near dusk. I thought I'd shave off a few minutes by cutting across instead of following the winding trail. Within a couple minutes, I was fighting through chest-high vegetation, sliding in muck, and again realizing that every shortcut comes with a price. Bushwhacking might sound rugged and exciting until you're in it. That's where you meet the real hazards. Sudden drops, precarious water crossings, thorn-covered plants, and terrain that's 10 times harder than the trail you just left. And when the light starts to fade, every shadow looks like a path, and every path looks the same. It's a quick way to lose your bearings and lose the actual trail completely. The truth is, shortcuts rarely save time. They don't always mean less distance, and they almost never mean less effort. What they do bring are unnecessary risks that can turn an easy hike into a stressful scramble. Now when I'm tempted to veer off trail or cut across a wide switchback, especially near dusk, I remind myself, the trail exists for a reason. It's not just the safest route, it's the smartest one. So I once got what sounded like great advice. Drink a warm cup of cocoa right before bed. It'll help you stay warm through the night. Well, I tried it. And for a little while, I did feel cozy. Until a couple hours later when I woke up and realized I had to pee badly. There's nothing quite invigorating like fumbling out of your sleeping bag at 12 a.m. in sub-freezing weather. By the time I got back inside my tent, I wasn't just cold. I was understandably colder than before. These days, I've got a much simpler routine. I just skip the bedtime cocoa and empty my bladder before I crash. It's not glamorous, but it keeps me warmer longer, and I actually sleep better through the night. Enjoy your cocoa by the fire, not just right before bed. Another mistake I made early on in cold temperature backpacking was not using layers properly. I'd start a hike early in the day bundled up, one thick sweater or pullover, thinking I was preparing for the cold. As the day progressed, I'd be sweating like crazy. Instead of cooling off by wearing and stripping a layer or two, I just keep going, overheating and unnecessarily sweating through my clothes. By the time the sun dropped and temperatures started to fall, my clothes would be soaked. When that sweat-cooled fabric hit cold evening air, I'd rapidly go from hot to freezing in no time. It's uncomfortable at best and downright dangerous in cold conditions. Wet clothing means faster heat loss, slower drying, and a miserable night at camp. Instead of wearing one heavy top, I now use multiple lighter layers. A moisture-wicking base, a breathable mid, and an insulating outer. If I start to feel warm, I'll shed a layer early before I start sweating. And when I reach camp, those lighter layers dry way faster when hung up than one thick, sweat-soaked pullover ever could. It's a small adjustment that makes a massive difference in warmth and comfort. The last mistake on my list brings me full circle, back up here to the top of Table Rock. Way back in the summer of 2007, a buddy and I tackled this trail for a challenging day hike, just to soak in the sights. I'd only completed it once before, way back in the late 90s. Feeling fresh and full of energy, we started our descent. Just a few minutes down, I got stung by a Yellowjacket. Fraught with panic and with 4 miles to go before reaching the parking lot, we decided to sprint down. Roughly 2,300 feet of elevation in what felt like 5 minutes. To this day, I'm pretty sure we set the unofficial speed record for the fastest return on Table Rock Trail. Looking back, that probably wasn't the smartest response. By the time we reached the car, I was experiencing a heavy helping of anaphylaxis. It never felt immediately life-threatening, but I didn't take any chances. We headed straight to a nearby hospital. That's when I was diagnosed with a Yellowjacket sting allergy and prescribed an EpiPen. The recommendation was clear. Always keep it with me while hiking or doing other outdoor activities. Over the years, I've had a few injectors and thankfully I've never had to use one. But the medication does degrade over time. You can check through a small window on the injector for discoloration, which means it's expired. At my own risk and my wife's dismay, I've gone quite a while without a viable EpiPen. My luck can only hold for so long. One misstep, one ill-timed sting, and I can face that pain all over again, potentially deep in the backcountry and alone. I owe it to myself and to others to stay safe out here, and with this, I'm really dropping the ball and pushing my luck, one hike at a time. Even after years of backpacking, you'll still make mistakes. You may overpack sometimes, misjudge the weather, or take a wrong turn. But that's the beauty of it. Backpacking keeps you humble. It reminds you that adventure isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, learning, and continuing forward.